So, my name is Dimitri Danilov. I'm the instructor, yoga teacher from Ukrainian Federation of Yoga, and I also represent the Yogis Without Borders team of the Ukrainian Federation of Yoga. And I'm here to present a small speech on the term dhyana, which is one of the main concepts in yoga, one of the main points, and usually this term is translated as meditation. And but if we everything that I will be presenting today is a result of my PhD research that I have finished a couple of years ago, and the thoughts which lay behind this PhD research, or even the aim to do this research, was to find out what exactly does dhyana mean. Because if we say meditation in the Western tradition, we come from a Latin root, meditatio, and it means mostly to think, or to think. And nowadays, when we say meditation in the yogic tradition, or even in the mainstream spiritual traditions that are active now, or even in the in everyday life, when we say meditation, we mean something different than just to think. And mostly it is not to think, it's something else. So my main goal was to find out what exactly was meant by this word dhyana. Does it really mean to think? Of course, we all know the definition of Patanjali in Yoga Sutras, where he defines dhyana as a continuous thought, cognition. But there are many texts that describe yogic tradition, and the views on yoga and the views on dhyana are different. So what I will talk about today is exactly this, what dhyana means, and if we look into different texts, which image does dhyana have? And these words that we use nowadays, do they really represent what was meant by the ancient tradition? So let me Arnold, can I get the possibility to show my slides? Just a second, I'll try to reach him. Okay, so now I have the possibility to show my slides. There it is. Can you see it? Great. let me move on, and I have put here in the table all the meanings that modern yoga practitioners use when they describe meditation, or dhyana actually, because these two words are often used as synonyms. So as we see it here, it can be a relaxation. So when I meditate, I relax. When I meditate, I'm comforting myself. I have met even traditions when the meditation is a sleep, a certain conscious sleep. It's a prayer. When we meditate and concentrate on different Hindu or other gods, it's a process of somatization, body-oriented attention. When, for example, in Iyengar tradition, the Iyengar describes dhyana as something as a meditation that is being done towards the body, and it's an active state when we do something with our body to get into a state of embodiment. Meditation is concentration. So when we concentrate on something, we have a light, or we have a certain object, and we concentrate on it, and we practice to concentrate better, not keeping the object of meditation always in our mind. It's a process of self-actualization, reflection, thinking, and actually these descriptions like thinking, reflection is pretty much the same as in the Western tradition. When we say meditation, it's the way the meditation was understood by René Descartes, Saint Augustine, and so on. And dreaming. So when we fantasize something, when we visualize something, there are many classes of modern meditation when people get together and they think about the beach or the woods or the mountains, and they imagine all these objects in their mind, and that has to do something with their mind, comforting or relaxing or something else. And these are the basic terms that describe dhyana in the modern tradition, and I was thinking whether all of them or some of them can have a relation to something that has been that was meant in the early times, in the ancient times, in the yogic tradition. So to do this research, I have looked into these texts. So it's the Rig Veda, the most ancient text that we have concerning the Indian tradition, ancient Indian tradition, and even probably one of the most ancient texts that we have as humans in any textual tradition, Upanishads. So these are the texts with teachings of certain gurus. It's mystical texts, but these are the first texts where yoga comes up, and these are the first texts where the dhyana appears actually. Mahabharata, which is the epic text where there are many stories about yogis. There are many philosophical pieces where the yoga is described and how it has to be done and what it is. My main attention was onto Bhagavad Gita and Moksha Dharma. These are two texts where yoga is one of the main topics. Of course, the Yoga Sutras on Patanjali, the most famous text probably in the yogic tradition nowadays. Text of Hatha Yoga, These are the later texts that appear in the Middle Ages. Dattatreya Yoga Shastra, Amanaska Yoga, Garaksha Shartaka, and Hatha Yoga Pradipika. I have a mistake here. Pradipika. There are two Russian letters for some reason at the end. So these are the texts. These texts represent not just one period, but different periods. So we can say that Rig Veda and Upanishads is more Vedic. Mahabharata is the epic texts of tradition. Yoga Sutra is a philosophical text. And Hatha Yoga is, they have more mystical experiences described, and they also have a lot of somatic, so the bodily practices in the text describing yoga. So we all know that Hatha Yoga is nowadays is the most popular yoga, where we do practices with our body and do asanas and so on. So this is the chronology of these texts. So the Rig Veda is the oldest one, the Upanishads come after that, Mahabharata, Yoga Sutras, and Hatha Yoga. Although I show here the chronology of these texts, but of course in Indian tradition the chronology is very hard to say exactly when the text was created. Because the tradition doesn't date the texts, and the texts oftenly change, and they have a complex structure where they have written text, early text, and then the compilation of texts, and so on and so on. So, but this table is an approximate and very I brought it so that we can easily put it in our mind, the chronology of the text that I'm going to be talking about. So, and actually there will be no, I will show right away in the beginning the 4 meanings that dhyana actually has in the text. There are many definitions in the yogic text, but if we try to study all of them and try to understand which what all these definitions of dhyana have in common, then we'll find well, to my opinion, we can separate them into 4 groups. First group of meanings is dhyana as a method to get to certain point, to get certain results. And to get to these results, we have to do something with us, with our body, with our conscious, with our health, with something that we have as self. Dhyana can be a state of consciousness. So when dhyana is described in the text, it's a certain state of consciousness, or we could also say it's a state of mind, a certain state of mind. Dhyana can be described as a process, and I will show the examples of what I mean here, and dhyana as a complex teaching. So dhyana can be a synonym for yoga in certain texts. And there is also a compound dhyana yoga, which is usually stated as a certain teaching that has to be studied. And actually, dhyana or dhyana yoga, it's a certain analogy to yoga. So let's begin, and I will show what I mean. So dhyana as a method, we can see that by using dhyana, we can get to moksha, a certain also soteriological freedom. So we can, by doing dhyana, we can get free. And this I have in the parentheses, I have the text mentioned where it is this idea brought up from. So in Atelier Yoga Shastra or Namanaska Yoga, dhyana, by doing dhyana, we can get to moksha, to freedom, a spiritual freedom. In certain texts, in Bhagavad Gita, in Moksha Dharma, in Upanishads, by doing dhyana, we can understand ourself, our spiritual self. We can understand Atman, the spiritual self. By doing dhyana in Moksha Dharma, for example, we can also heal ourselves. We can get healthier. We can get rid of illnesses. Another vector of dhyana is control of emotions. So by doing dhyana, we can control the emotions that we have. And this point is very important because the first definition of yoga in Katha Upanishad is exactly the same. So in Katha Upanishad, yoga is controlling of emotions or controlling of indriyas. And here in Moksha Dharma we have the same definition, only the term that is being defined is dhyana. And this is the first situation where dhyana and yoga come as synonyms. And this is not the only example. There are many examples when dhyana and yoga is pretty much the same thing in the text. Let's go on. And clarity of consciousness. So by doing dhyana, we can somehow either control, unite, or clear our consciousness. We can reorganize our inner self by doing dhyana. Unity of consciousness and unwrittenness. In Yoga Sutra, in the second chapter, there is a definition of dhyana as dhyana, where dhyana is something that is a practice that can get us out of vritti. And vritti, Patanjali defines vritti, but I would say that vritti is cognitive mistakes, something that makes us less conscious, less we can gets us into being. Vritti is a cognitive mistakes that prevent us from understanding the world. So dhyana is something that gets us out of the vritti, something that helps us not to do cognitive mistakes and helps us to understand the world better, which helps us, of course. Dhyana is a method to achieve something that we're wishing. So, for example, if I want something, by doing dhyana, I can achieve that. And of course, in Garaksha Shataka, by doing dhyana, we can get to truth, which is, of course, also very interesting because it helps us. Well, actually, it has a certain relation to unwrittenness, so we can get to truth, to understanding the world without the cognitive errors. So I'll show a couple of examples. For example, the Yoga Sutra, and here dhyana is the Chitta Prasadanam, which is the clarity of mind, or the unity of mind, is being done by doing dhyana on something that we desire. And this is also a very good example of a situation where in Yoga Sutra we are talking about desires. And this is one of the main differences, although it's a problematic question and there are different opinions on this. But here I think there is an example where the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali talk about desires as something positive in comparison with Buddhism, or where desires are understood as something negative. And this is a very strong point, of course. But I won't go into that, but just, this is a nice, a great point to think about. But this is not the point of the presentation and my speech. So I would say that dhyana is some great practice to do, to get to a certain state of mind, which is united, and glittering. Okay, and the next example of this, I marked these points as blue ones that are that have to do something with our mind or consciousness. So the method dhyana is in Bhagavad Gita. By dhyana in self, see some Atman as self, others by Sankhya Yoga, and rest as Karma Yoga. So by doing dhyana, we can see Atman. So this is the method, dhyana as a method. Although it's not described what exactly has to be done, but in this example we see that we can understand the inner self, the spiritual self, by doing dhyana. The next point is the dhyana as a certain state in which any human can be. And this state of consciousness, and this is the state of consciousness. So in Maitri Upanishad, Moksha-dharma, and in two different shlokas, we can see the examples of this. For example, and this is also a very nice piece, at Brahmakalpa in ancient times, O Brahmanas, at a meeting of Brahma Rishis, spiritually great, doubt as for existence of the world arose. They stood in devotion, keeping silent, motionless. So here in this piece of text, we see that Brahma Rishis, they stood in a certain state. What were they doing in a state? They had doubt about the existence of the world. Actually, for some, this in this piece of text, it reminds us of René Descartes, who was talking about the doubt as a beginning of thought, of his thought, and that was his definition of existence, of himself, his doubt, which provoked his thoughts. And actually this piece of text reminds us of that meditation in the Western tradition 1,600 years later. So in this text, although it might seem a little bit complex, but if we try to understand it, we can see that Brahma Rishis, they stood in silent, motionless, and they were thinking about the existence of the world, whether it exists or not. And this state in which they were standing and thinking about this was dhyana. So the dhyana, and we can see that dhyana is very spiritual and very mindfulness state in which we think about very difficult existential problem. Yeah, and this state is not a state when we have to run somewhere or we have to actively think about something, but this state is not to do something. It's for example, in this text, it's a state in which you can be for a long period of time, and this is also a meaning of dhyana. And the second example of this definition of dhyana as a state of consciousness is Maitri Upanishad, where it says that indeed, therefore, he who knows, well, actually, the first part is not so important. The last sentence is very important. Similar, dhyana with a focused mind is praised by wise ones. This is also here in this example of text, in very ancient text in the Upanishads. Dhyana is a certain state of focused mind. So we also are in this if we focus and we, yeah, it's hard to describe this state, but actually we see another example of dhyana as a state of full focused mind. And we have two more definitions. Dhyana as a process of cognition, worship, visualization, and deep insights into parts of the body. So actually, in these four examples, we can see that the definitions are very, very different. So, for example, the process of cognition and the process of worshipping a god, for example, it's a very different situation. It's a very different process. Yeah, one is concerned with cognition and understanding something, and the other, for example, as worship, is that it has to be it has connection to religion and worshipping. Yeah, and the third, it's also different than cognition, and embodiment as a last definition is also comes yeah, also very different. Yeah, so well, first, to summarize this, first of all, if we compare these definitions with modern yoga practice, we will see that, of course, nowadays we also have visualization practices. Nowadays, meditation is understood as cognition. Nowadays, meditation is sometimes, as I showed in the earlier slides, is concerned with worshipping or religion. So the definition and understanding of dhyana back in ancient times and nowadays hasn't changed much, but and all of these definitions have their place in the yogic tradition, in different texts, and sometimes even in the same text. Dhyana can be understood differently as a different process, but let's look at how exactly it is done. For example, in the Yoga Sutra, dhyana is understood as a one-way continuous cognition of an object. So if I want to understand something, for example, if I'm doing dhyana to understand what dhyana means, and I spent 2-3 years doing a research on this, and I study texts, I study previous works on this term, I study, I visit lectures concerning this topic, I speak to modern day practitioners. So every day I'm going further and further into a understanding of what dhyana means. And this process by Patanjali is dhyana by his definitions. So every day continuous cognition of a certain object. But although this process is understood, it can be, for example, in Garakshashataka, in the medieval texts, it's about 15th century, but 14th, 15th, maybe 16th century text, dhyana can also be understood as a process of visualization. And here I have a table where it is said in the second row, how do you say it? The table, yeah. We have a point where we have to concentrate, yeah. Adhara, Vishuddha, Manipuraka, and so on. In the second, we what we have to look for, yeah, what image we have to look for. For example, if we concentrate on Anahata, what we expect to see is lightning. Or if we concentrate in Manipuraka, in the stomach, then we will see sun rising in the west. Yeah, and the sun rising in the west is more of a red color. Yeah, or if we concentrate on Svadhisthana, then, and this is the part in lower body, the pelvis, and here in the pelvis area, then we expecting to see the precious ruby, and so on. So in this here we can say that dhyana is a process of visualization, where we see certain object, when we see certain symbols or images, which are of certain color and which have some material recognition. But if we compare to the previous definition of Yoga Sutra, in Yoga Sutra, we can see the connection, yeah, because in Patanjali's text and in Garakshashataka, it's a certain process. It's not a state. It's not something else. It's a process. We concentrate in certain part of our body, and after that we will see a certain image, we expect to see. And in the end, dhyana also can be understood as a complex teaching. And actually, this is maybe the only definition that isn't used nowadays in this understanding. So dhyana nowadays, or meditation, this is a praxis. It's not a complex teaching. It's not, I mean, we say yoga, as a teaching, and dhyana is some of the instruments that yoga has. But in some texts, for example, in Bhagavad Gita, in Moksha Dharma, in Tattagya Shastra, dhyana can be understood as a teaching. So we don't do yoga, we do dhyana. Dhyana is what we do. And for example, we could say not the European Union of Yoga, we could say European Union of Dhyana, which I find very interesting. And for example, of course, the Dhyana Yoga is the most interesting compound, and we can see it in Bhagavad Gita and Moksha Dharma, and it is compared. For example, in Moksha Dharma, there is a piece: out of all yogas, the highest is dhyana. So there are many yogas, but dhyana is the highest one. And it is of two kinds, they say, who know the Vedas. So the wise ones. And, oh yeah, I have only one here. But I find this very interesting, that dhyana can, nowadays the term dhyana, it has lost its value in this position. But it had a very strong understanding and was compared to yoga. And of course, now I will summarize. So there are, as I said, the 4 dhyanas. Dhyana as a method of healing, of getting a spiritual freedom. Dhyana, as I showed, we can see it as a state of consciousness, as Brahma rishis who are in this state of doubt, for example, or dhyana as a process of visualization, seeing things in our body, for example, or dhyana is a process of cognition, or in the end, as I was showing, dhyana is a complex teaching, and it can be compared to yoga itself. Yeah. So, how can we summarize all of what I have showed? Although it's not popular nowadays to say that dhyana can be this, and that, we have to honestly say that it is variable. Dhyana is not, it always had different meanings, and it's normal, of course, that some concept, some term can be understood differently by different people, by different traditions. We can say that dhyana, although there are many meanings, it always has to do something with a process of cognition, of visualization, of intellectual process, of changing something in our consciousness, and it has some sort of results, of course. It's a, this is another point. And what we else can say? We can say that nowadays we have different understandings of meditation. But, and although we sometimes can say that these understandings are not proper, or these are not proper, for example, meditation has to do only with the cognitive processes, or some people say that meditation is is an instrument, for example. But if we rely on the ancient text, we can definitely say that dhyana can be different things, and it can be actually different. So the modern practitioners, they don't really develop something new. They rely on the old ideas that have, although they might not have read the text, although they might not have the connection to the tradition, textual tradition, but sometimes, but the ideas that they rely on and that they propose are ancient ones. Although I have to say that in the text mostly the ideas are more complex than sometimes they are shown in the modern yoga studios. And in the end, one of the main interesting points, the meditation is oftenly used as an instrument, but actually meditation can be understood as a teaching itself. So we can grow or develop by meditative practices, and it's a teaching itself. And this is actually, although it might sound maybe a little bit strange or new, actually this idea can be also understood from the different point. For example, the Hatha Yoga. Nowadays, Hatha Yoga is one of the main and popular direction in which the yoga is developing. And anyone on the street, even someone who doesn't do yoga, if we ask him what yoga looks like, he will say they do asanas, although he might not know anything about yoga. But we all know that yoga with asanas, it's it came up only in the 10th century. Actually, the asanas is a very late product of yoga, or late method of yoga. Although dhyana and the meditation is the most ancient one, and even the first ancient descriptions of yogic practices, they firstly understand yogic practice as a state of self-development using methods of cognition or meditative states. And for example, the definition of yoga in Katha Upanishad, it's about 3rd century BC. But the asanas, first they are mentioned in Yoga Sutras, which is in the commentary to Yoga Sutras. Now, in Yoga Sutras, there is a word asana and the definition of asana, and it's a 3rd or 4th century AD. So it is a later, and it's understood only as a sitting pose. Yes, the meditative practice is a basic practice related to yoga, and that is also one of the main points. So this is what I had to say, and if you have questions, I would love to answer them. Thank you for listening.